Hello and welcome back to the Co-Parenting Diaries. This is episode one. Episode one dropping now, and I'm so excited to share this podcast with you. I just want to say a couple of things though, because there's been a lot of stuff in my head before starting this, and one of the things was I don't have an aesthetic house. I don't have a studio. When I look at all the podcasts that are really successful online and I see their Instagrams and they've got this nice couch and the microphone and all this kind of stuff. I was like, I don't have that, so I can't start this podcast. But the reality is, as long as you've got a computer and I've got a mic here, you don't even need a mic. You can just get started. And that's what I'm doing. I'm being completely imperfect. I'm trying to throw all perfectionism out the window because there's some topics that I think need to get out in the world. And who knows, in 6 months' time, I might have a studio. In a year's time, I might have a studio. This may not get listened to by anybody but myself and my mum. So who knows? But anyway, here we go. Episode one. I thought I would start this podcast off with explaining how I got here, like how I ended up being a 50-50 co-parent. I went from being a wife, a mum, a career girl, to still being all of those, just not the wife part. And I want to take you back 2 years ago. So it's 2023, and I've just moved with my ex-husband and my two kids from the UK back to Australia. We had lived in Australia for 6 years, and we left in 2019 to go back home because we just had our first daughter and we wanted to be with family, and we weren't sure how long we were going to stay for, but we gave everything up here to go back. And when we went back, we actually found out we were pregnant with our second child. So that was a big spanner in the works. And quite quickly after landing, realised that we had probably made a pretty big mistake in coming back. And actually, the UK wasn't really what we had anticipated. And life in Australia was actually really, really good. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. We eventually managed to get back to Australia after lots of loopholes and lots of challenges in 2023. We landed in March, ready to start our life again, or almost pick up our old life with our two kids and get going. I was working for myself, I'm a freelancer. My ex-husband got his job back that he was in for 6 years when we were here. We just slotted back into life. It was like we'd just popped out and now we're back in again. The friendship groups were still there. The only thing that was different was I had two children and I needed to get one into school. It was tough adjusting, and it was different to what I was used to before because when we left Australia, I had one child. She was under the age of one. And everybody knows if you've got children, one is very different to two. Um, but anyway, we were back here, but things weren't quite as happy as we thought it would be. Um, we were living sort of like mates, like best mates in the house. We were passing ships. The communication had gone, the excitement had gone, the passion had gone. But I honestly, truly believed it was because we were in that thick of being parents. We had two young kids that weren't yet in full-time school. And I was juggling a career. He was juggling a career. There was just a lot on. And we always seemed to be going from paycheck to paycheck, even though both earning an okay wage. We were just stuck in a rut. And I was starting to try and do things to get us out. I was starting to suggest things. But in my head, I thought, you know what? It's not that long until both kids are in school. Then we can start working on our marriage and start working on everything. Anyway, I didn't even get the chance to get that far because on October 31st, 2023, I came home from the hairdressers and my husband literally just turned around and said, I don't love you anymore. I've just realised I don't love you anymore. And that day, my entire world just shattered. I can remember the whole conversation. I can remember where I was sat, what I was wearing, how I felt. The kids were in bed. And I was just like, what the hell? What the hell? He didn't really explain too much after that. I think apart from that, he had been feeling this way for a couple of years. And when I say I had no idea, I had no idea. Whether I was just completely blind to it because I was so wrapped up in being mum and trying to keep a roof over our head, or he was just really good at masking it. I think it's probably a bit of a blend of both. But my whole world just flipped upside down, and I could not believe what I was hearing. It was the last thing I ever thought I would hear coming out of his mouth. I thought we could get through everything. We had been through so much. I thought we could get through everything. And the next 3 weeks were pretty much spent me trying to get out of him what was going on and try and get into his brain. And I was trying to come up with solutions and trying to fix things. And, 3 weeks later, he just said, I want a separation. I don't want to be together anymore. And it was at that point I had to go, what the hell does life look like now? What, what? I'm going to be a single mum. And I had such a bad mentality around that label, which I shouldn't, and no one ever should feel ashamed for that. But I did. I was like, and in my head, I was like, how am I ever going to deal with or live with the fact that you're going to end up being with someone else and we're not going to be a family unit? And that absolutely crushed me. And we were together, living in the house still from November to the April, so 4 or 5 months. And nothing really changed too much in the house. We were still living pretty much how we were. It wasn't difficult in the sense of getting along for the kids, but it was clear that we were going to need to live in separate homes and we were going to need to split the responsibility. Now, I've always been very, very firm from day one of having children that if anything were to ever happen, and we didn't talk about this often, but I think if it ever came up or someone made a comment, I would always say, if we ever broke up, there is no way you get to be an every other weekend dad. You are 50% in. Like you are equally in this as me. Being a parent should not fall on my shoulders. It should fall on both of our shoulders equally. I am very passionate about that. I don't think it's fair that everything gets put onto the mum just because we're the ones that can have kids because they don't have the biological pieces to be able to have children. As in, like, carry the children and push it out, not the actual doing. Um, and he never ever said otherwise. He was never like, no, no chance. I'm not going to have the kids. He absolutely loves his children and he loves being a dad. And I think I am very grateful that that never changed when we split. And he was very firm, don't take these kids away from me. Because do you know what? We were surrounded by people who had split. And we didn't know a single person who had a healthy dynamic when they split. Most of the people that we knew, the dads were every other weekend dads, which, by the way, there is nothing wrong with if that's how you've set it up. I say every other weekend dad is just like that's the way to explain the co-parenting. I don't say that in a way of like putting anyone down. It's either that or dad completely disappeared and mum raises them all on their own, or like mum's just gone a little bit wild and toxic and is making it very difficult for the dad. They are the only dynamics we ever knew. And so and I've grown up seeing that and he's grown up seeing that. We both come from divorced families. And one thing that I knew I didn't want was my kids to grow up having to feel that uncomfortableness because they're parents, or having to feel like they can't talk to us about anything, or, you know, they would feel awkward doing assemblies, seeing mum and dad there, and mum and dad having to sit separately, and all those kind of things. So that's something that I was really, really passionate about. So when managed to find a rental and move out, we sat down and we spoke about what it now looks like. What does our situation look like? At that time in April, We had one child in kindy, which meant she was at school 3 days a week. And we had another child in school full time. So he was also working, doing the job that he's always done. His work is physical work on location. So he works at a place where he does like tradey type stuff. And he has to start at 5 o'clock in the morning and he finishes between 12 and 2 o'clock, depending on what the day is. I, at the time, was a freelancer. I had social media management clients and I'd worked from home, which is what I had been doing for the last 4 years, managing the kids and juggling. So we sat down and we said, like, okay, how do we split our time with the kids as equally as possible in the situation that we're in right now? And we just put it on paper, and it was almost impossible for him to financially survive by having the kids 50% of the time. And by looking at it, it was because one of our children was not yet in full-time school. When we looked at the arrangement when both children were in full-time school, it was much easier for him to manage 50-50 and also be able to afford to survive. So we sat down and we said, we're going to work towards 50-50, but right now it doesn't work. It doesn't work for him financially. And as much as I'm also like, there's so many people out there like, I can't have my kids 50-50 because of my job and then just don't do anything about it. He was like, I will go to my boss and I will try and work out an arrangement. But there's these 2 days where she is not in school and the cost of childcare is more than his day's wage. So it made 0 sense, him having them 50% of the time at that point. So what we did is I said, okay, well, I have my week, Monday to Sunday. That's no problem. You don't need to think about that. Now, our youngest was not in school Mondays and Thursdays. So I said to him, well, there's no point you getting the kids back on a Monday because one of them's not at school. So we decided that I would then drop off on his kid week. I would drop the kids off at school on a Tuesday, and then that was him to pick up on a Tuesday afternoon. He then had the kids on Wednesday because they both were in school. He would drop them off and he would pick them up and he would have them. And then on Thursday, our youngest was not at school. That was not a school day. So he would actually drop her to me for the day, the hours that the oldest was at school, and he would go to work. So I would almost babysit. I would have our youngest on a Thursday from 8:30 till 3 p.m. He then would pick them up, pick our oldest up from school, pick our youngest up from me, and he would do the normal school run on a Friday because they're both in school, and then he'd have them until the Sunday afternoon. So it wasn't quite 50-50, but it was as much as 50-50 as we could do. Um, it worked. And it was also, I think, a great slow transition. The kids had been with me full time since they were born. They had only known mum at home working. So I do think going straight 50-50 at that point might have been too much for the kids. We don't really know. But it worked out that I would pretty much see the girls every couple of days. It worked. It worked for the situation we were in. It worked for everything else. He had to reduce his hours so he could do school hours. Instead of him working 5 a.m. till, let's say, 1 p.m., he was having to work 9 a.m. till 3 p.m. So that is reduced hours. He then had to make it up on the weeks that he didn't have the kids in order to bring in a full-time wage. And why that was also my concern or not my problem. But if he couldn't afford to pay his bills and put food on the table, then that impacts our kids. So for me, turning around saying, "Oh, stuff that's your week, you left, this is your choice, you find childcare," and knowing that that would have financially been a burden. And it would have been for me too. If I had to find childcare those 2 days a week, it would have still been more than I bring in a day. So for us, it was the best way to sort that situation. And it was a slow process. I spent most of that time, to be quite honest, like trying to adjust, trying to detach. I cried a lot when I didn't have the kids. I remember the first weekend I didn't have the girls at my house and they were at his. And I sat on the sofa watching Vampire Diaries, eating super noodles, and I felt like I was back at university. It was the first time, so I was what, 33, 34? It was the first time since I was 18 years old that I was alone because I went to uni, lived with people. Me and my ex-husband got together when I was 21. We'd been together 14 years. The first time I was sat in my house, no kids and no partner. I was completely by myself. I had no, I had so much freedom. If I wanted to go and get ice cream from somewhere at 10 p.m., I could do it. If I wanted to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go for a walk, I could do it. I did not know what to do with all of that time and all of that freedom. I was petrified. I cried a lot. I did a lot of crying. I did a lot of grieving. It was the best way for me to get it out so the kids couldn't see. I didn't want to cry when the kids were around. I didn't want to bleed onto them. So I used that time to do that. Looking back, the kids going back and forth to me all the time, I think hindered them from really settling with dad and really like building that connection. They were starting to build a very strong connection with him, which I hadn't seen when we were together. And I think that's because I ended up doing everything. I was just the default of everything in the house. And again, that's probably a whole nother conversation to have another time. But even though I wouldn't change what we did, the thing that I saw was because I think, particularly for our youngest, it was a lot of back and forth with her, and she's autistic. She just needs very straight cut routine, black and white. Too much back and forth overloads her. Our oldest child's been diagnosed with ADHD. She can go backwards and forwards 20 times a day and thrive. Youngest, not so much. Anyway, the plan then was once the kids were both in full-time school, so that was the April. Our school year here in Australia is sort of February to December. So we had from April to December, because that's when the kids break up, doing it this way. I don't know, it was like 60-40, maybe 70, I don't know, whatever. 60-40 was probably the split, if I was honest. One thing I did struggle with, I think, was not having a full Sunday. I'd always get the kids back like Sunday afternoon, so I never really like had a Sunday evening before work on a Monday to get myself ready or, to have that freedom. But it was what it was. He also played soccer, and he played every Sunday. So what he would do is drop the kids off before he went to soccer. So we didn't leave the kids on the side, and just so he could go and enjoy it. It's what he's always done for the last 14 years. And I knew as well, for his mental health, he needed to keep continuing that, and I couldn't take that away from him. So I would just say, hey, just drop them off before you go to soccer, go play soccer, go do you, I'll have them back. So then in 2024, February 2024, we moved to 50-50. 1 week on, 1 week off. And we decided to do the 50-50 split and the changeover on a Friday at school. Reason being is it's a nice neutral place. And even though we have no problem handing the kids over to each other, it I did notice that one of our children did get a bit anxious every time we were around each other. And not for any reason, like we never argued, we were never rude to each other, but we could just see it. And I thought, you know what? The less they see or the less they experience of that, the better. School's a very neutral place. And also, like in the previous setup, when I got the kids back on a Sunday, they were so emotional. They were all over the place, and it would take me all of Sunday afternoon and evening to just regulate them. So, what we found with school, and as we've now done this 50-50, they do all their regulation at school. Picking them up, it doesn't matter whether it's me or him, we get the same child. There's no emotional or, you know, bratty or anything like that. They've been at school, it's a school day, they've had a big, like, space between transitioning between parents. So that's what we do. We share school uniforms, school bags, lunchbox, water bottle, trainers. That's all we share. At the start, we were also sharing iPads. He used to come by and grab like a changeover bag, which was iPads. Um, and that was really it actually at the start. And then I quickly got the kids their own iPads, so we didn't have to do that anymore. We didn't need to do any more changeover bags. But that's how we've done it now. We're coming up to the end of, well, it's September. So we've nearly done a whole school year of 50-50, and it works for us. It works for him, it works for me, it works for the kids. I actually took on a corporate job in February, and I had to explain, hey, 1 week I don't have the kids, so I've got a lot more flexibility around my times. But the second week I have my kids, which means I need to go and do school drop off and I need to do school pickup. And my work were great. It just, we managed to work out the times and we worked out the flexibility. And I have a lot of flexibility around the kids. It's essentially as long as I get my work done, doesn't matter when. So, which I'm grateful for, which is what I've always had when I was freelancing. Their dad was able to adjust to 50-50. So he does 1 week where he does normal hours and 1 week where he does reduced hours. And it's working. Financially, he's okay. Work-wise, okay. That works. And now and then we will have to do changeover with each other because of school holidays. In school holidays, we still do 50-50. We still do Friday changeovers. And what we actually do is 12 o'clock on a Friday. I either hand them to him or he hands them to me, depending on who's got them. And we keep it as that. We just keep it as midday. Unless one of us needs to change it, then we let the other one know. But essentially, that's how we got here. Um, we have two separate houses. Our kids have their stuff at his, their stuff at mine. As I said, the only thing we share is school uniform on the changeover day. So there's like one set of uniform that floats between houses all the time. Their school bags, their lunchbox, and their school shoes. And oh, we also have scooters. So the kids do have scooters. We went halves on Christmas presents for them. So wherever the scooters are, if the other parent needs it, we live 5 minutes away from each other. So it's a quick, hey, can I grab the scooters this weekend? We're going to go to the park or we're going to go on holiday. We'll probably do that with other things like bikes if we get bikes for them. As they get older, obviously they'll have mobile phones and all those kind of things that obviously will be shared. But right now, that's, I guess, I guess where we're at. And I think for me, the how I work out whether this co-parenting situation is working is first of all, we look at the kids and how happy they are. Are they okay? Are they happy? Are they thriving? If they're thriving, great. It means they're being fed good energy, like they're being fed and raised in houses with a good energy. And then I look at myself and I go, am I okay? Am I happy? Do I have the space to do everything? Is there anything that I'm feeling is a concern right now? And I mean, I can look at the dad and make assumptions, but essentially he's responsible for his happiness. But again, I'd always hope that, and we do, if there is any issues that each of us have in our lives that may impact the kids, we do speak up on it. We do talk to each other about it. Um, and we're going through a possible transition right now, which I can't share on yet, but I will definitely in a later episode, depending on what happens, where we're having to come together and we're having to work out some situations, and we're having to work out some scenarios and what if this and what if that. And I love that we're able to do that. I love that we're able to have that flexibility for the kids, but also for us. And yeah, I hope that helps almost give you a little bit of background on how I became a co-parent. I am in absolutely no way an expert. I just wanted to do this in a way that was as peaceful and positive as possible because essentially it was out of my control, the separation, and it's completely out of the kids' control. And I just thought, what can I control? I can control my emotions. I can control how I handle this. I can control what I do. There was no blueprint out there. There was actually very little positive stuff online when I was going through my separation about separating and about co-parenting. Everything was like how to co-parent with a narcissist and how to do this and how to do that. And I was thinking, well, I don't have that issue. Like, thank God, but I don't have that issue. Like, we're just separating and we're now having to co-parent. We're having to work it out. Neither of us have a clue what to do. Um, and neither of us have any family here. That's another thing. That's a whole nother topic as well. Gosh, I'm going to write a lot of topics after this one. So yeah, I hope that helps. I hope that kind of sets the tone, I guess, or gives you a bit of a background story. Um, Ready for later on. If you have loved this episode, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a review. I am trying to build up our Spotify reviews, which would be amazing. The more reviews, the more people get to hear this. If you know anyone going through co-parenting or separation, you think they'll be able to relate, or even maybe they're together, but they're just struggling with the balance in the household, please share it with them. I would really, really appreciate it. And also, you can follow me at Abundantly Lucy, both on TikTok and Instagram, and also the Co Parenting Diaries. Thanks, guys. Take care.